It's good to see all of you. Today, as Ricky said, we're going to be talking about the future of workforce. Joining me on stage today is Bashir Bseirani, with the CEO of Avertra. And then also joining us is Ali Mohammed, the Senior Director of Digital Innovation and Transformation at NYPA. Can we give him a round of applause? So we've touched on it a little bit today about, what is happening in the utility workforce and what needs to be changing. But specifically today, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on some of the newest people who have entered the workforce, Gen Z. But before we get into that, I would love it if we could get to know our panelists a little better. So if you could explain to me what energizes you in the work that you do, that would be fabulous.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you, Bseirani, for having me here. I'm Ali Mohammed. I'm the Senior Director of Digital Innovation and Transformation Office. And the reason why I say that is, I lead the innovation group, and that's something that excites me. We are in a transitional phase in the industry where innovation is very pivotal for us meeting the energy goals. And especially at NYPA, the employer is, it makes a big difference, right? And for us at NYPA, we are very forward-thinking, visionary, and want to make sure that we have the right tools necessary to meet those goals. As part of being of the state, helping the state, the residents, other state agencies also meet these goals. So I think we are in the center of everything we're doing at NYPA, and that's what energizes me.
Thank you so much. Bashir.
Awesome. Oh, wow, that's loud. Oof. Good morning, everybody.
You're loud.
I know I am. I can go without a mic, and I think everybody can still hear me. First of all, I want to say Ramadan Mubarak to all those fasting, to our Muslim brothers and sisters out there. Secondly, what energizes me, it's a great question. Honestly, taking things that people think are impossible to do and actually showing them that it can be done. Right? We live in a world where everything seems to be complicated and everything seems to be woven together, and then figuring out how to make a change here has 16 impacts down there. And that's really what makes me wake up every day and makes our company wake up every day, because we just have a huge passion towards simplifying life and making the complex things look simple.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. Okay, so Gen Z has definitely entered the workforce. What do you think has changed as a result? Bashir?
Everything, right? I mean, look how I'm dressed, right? I mean, this is very unusual. If this makes any of y'all comfortable, then you're hiring the wrong people, right? Just to be straight up with you. In the Gen Z workforce right now, so I'm a millennial, right? So I got right at the cusp, and I'd say probably around 40% of my current staff out of our 250 people globally are Gen Z, right? And when we looked at it, we realized that they have different types of demands than we did before, right? They ask harder questions than we ever did before. They're bolder than we were ever before. And the reality is, if you don't give them the right time, attention, space, as well as freedom to be autonomous, but also give them the structure and to define what discipline is for them, right? There's this concept where agility and discipline can't come together, right? But I think that's a false thing, right? You can have discipline, agile, or organized chaos, whichever way you want to look at it, right? So in terms of what's changed, honestly, it's the leaders. The leaders have to change because the workforce has changed and they have much higher expectations.
Thank you. Ali?
I would say, let's start with some statistics as we are millennials, right? So when I looked at the industry trends, there's 25% of, from a utility perspective, 25% of the workforce has already retired in 2022. And by the time we reach 2025, it'll be 50%. So there's a big gap that we are seeing in the utility industry, and that will be filled by Gen Zs. And 66% of Gen Z population have voted that they want to be in clean energy sector because it's the value, it's the core mission. They want to be part of the mission. And one example I shared with them earlier was, we hire interns every year. And now we see the change in how the questions are being asked. Rather than the employers asking questions, now it's the interns asking us, what are your core values for your company? How can I be part of that core? Is it something that you have? Are you tracking these on a regular basis? Can you show proof? I mean, those are some of the questions that come up now that we haven't seen in the past. It feels like I'm, in a millennial body, but having a mindset of a Gen Z, trying to bridge that gap in between and addressing all the needs.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because right now, everybody's looking for a purpose in life, right? And I think that's a big thing. So, let's be realistic. Our industry is not the sexiest in the world, right? I mean, it's not the Amazon, it's not an e-tailer, it's not, a fashion house, but it still has a massive impact on society, right? And that's what the folks that at least we're hiring are loving, because oh my God, today, 18 million people are using our products. and are able to reduce their energy usage by X, right? Or we had folks utilize our outage map to find a shelter, right? And they actually feel like there's a real big purpose behind what we're delivering on a daily basis. And we feel that if we're not actually turning our brand and our image to a purpose-driven brand, then also we're not going to be able to hire anybody else either. And that's where also we're seeing a lot of our utility customers and utility partners go through a brand redefinition, right? So when you're pushing out your job posts, your career pages, your corporate website, it's no longer this very boring infrastructure company, right? You have to look at it as we're change makers, and we want you to be part of this team as we keep driving change through our communities.
One thing I want to add is also diversity too, and I think that's very critical for Gen Z. So as ESG, DE&I goals, how are those being met within the organization? So they want to be part of that change. They want to be part of the new workforce, and I think those are very critical factors that we need to consider, especially at the leadership level. And that's why when you talk about brand changing, those are the things that we see in utilities today is how they are updating the metrics. So what are some of the metrics they're using? The KPIs are completely different from what you see decades ago. So I think we are seeing that shift already, and that's, we are in the middle of everything today, so that's good.
That is good. I think it's a little ironic that it's a bunch of millennials up on stage talking about Gen Z. Gen Z in the audience. Next year we're going to have you come up, I promise. So you have talked a little bit about the change that is happening, but what do you think needs to change more fully, like moving forward? Ali?
I would say, and I'm going to stick to the utility sector. I'm not going to get into the private sector here, but the adaptation of change. How soon can we adapt to cultural change? Things that I think utility is very much traditionally run. And looking at all the Gen X's all the way till the millennials, there's a certain way things are getting done, but now that is changing. How soon can you adapt to those? And I think from a Gen Z perspective, they want to see change right away. There's certain things that they think about where it's recognition, it's about growth. And if you look at the traditional industry, utility industry, you don't see growth like every year. I mean, it's hard for people to get promoted, to climb up the corporate ladder. But the way the Gen Zs think, it's completely opposite. They want to be recognized for the work that they're bringing in, the talent that they bring in, the innovation they're doing, and they want to make sure that they have a path forward. And I think that's a big cultural change within the utility industry that we have to yet see.
Yeah, to add to that, I would say that, I'm tying to being purpose-driven. People want to know where they're going, right? I've worked at utilities where traditionally your performance management is once a year. I've been at others where it's once a quarter. Well, the reality is these Gen Z folks want to hear more about their performance. They want more personalized goals to where they want to grow to and the value that they perceive they can bring to us, right? And that's what I'm saying. We really have to listen to them because that's going to really change your entire HR process. Performing skill gap analysis. So for example, if you're a utility that's looking to deploy smart IVR in the next 5 years, well, what does that mean to your current staff and skill set? Do you go outside and hire a bunch of expensive contractors? Or do you invest in folks internally knowing that 5 years from now you're going to have to run a program like that and actually start getting your internal team to go through an MVP mindset and doing certain things internally and having self-dependence instead of depending always on external experts, right? And that kind of shows your own internal teams that you're believing in them, right? Because I've worked at many utilities where they bring us in and the first thing is we get resistance from our counterparts because they're like, well, why'd they hire this external person when they could have trained me instead, right? So that's, I think, a really huge thing that, utilities need to start investing more into their learning and development programs as well too. And not only on the engineering side, right? Because a lot of that happens in engineering, right? Because of safety and environment and all the things and complexities around compliance there. But what about the IT folks? What about your call center folks? What about your business analysts, right? Today, all these systems and all vendors like Avertra and Deuley and SEW and all these vendors that are creating data across your entire landscape, right? How many people here have programs to train your analysts on data or take someone from a call center and turn them into a data analyst? Right? Probably not many, right? So these are the things that really have to change from a cultural mindset, from a learning and development mindset, and actually have a culture, right? Not the culture of you got to work weekends to deploy the system because we're behind on a go live, right? It's like, well, if you get them excited about it and they see the value of why they're doing it, they'll be willing to work every weekend without complaining, right? But of course, we don't want that, right? So having that work-life balance also is realistic. But there's a lot of projects, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the utility industry on a daily basis. So there's a lot of hard work, and I'm sure many folks here have spent nights and weekends doing work and deploying things just for the sake of other folks. Well, how do you also incentivize, as part of the onboarding process, getting people to know what it means to work at a utility and not having them get shocked and then all of a sudden 2.5 months later they resign and you're back at state zero from a recruitment process, which hurts, right? Because now that has direct impact on any of your projects that you're looking to deliver.
Just to add on to that, and that's a very key point, traditionally how utilities have recruited in the past, the change that we have seen is tremendous, because it's like the value, it's, what's the purpose of it, and that's what Gen Zs look for. And we've seen the shift internally too, and I completely agree with your comment about the performance. We, even in our company, we do it once a year. There's no periodic, we meet maybe every 6 months just to see how things are moving, but it's not a documented process. And I think that is very critical for Gen Zs is how can they improve? They need constant feedback. That's something that we're not used to in the utility industry.
100%.
So I think you have definitely touched on this a little bit. I don't know that many people are really prepared to work with the Gen Z workforce, but I know we're not prepared for, Generation Alpha that's coming up behind them that will be here before we know it. So how do we entice more people, more Gen Z talent and future generations to come into the utility space and help drive the energy transition?
I mean, one of the statistics I mentioned was, Gen Zs are very much interested in clean energy, and I think with the whole shift, the whole dynamic that's shifting between, transitioning from, the more traditional ways into clean energy. I mean, we see the change already. We see, as utility, we used to get 5-10 resumes for interns. But now we see the change every year. Now we go up to hundreds of resumes coming in. We see the change already. It is about what your purpose is, about what your core missions are for the company, what are your state goals that you're meeting to achieve, and how do you actually convey the message out to the world. And I think that's very important. That will help attract talent. But we see, and there's a transition, right? There's going to be a generation gap between the millennials, the X's, and now the Gen Zs. I mean, we talk about digital transformation. The millennials and the Gen X's are changing to the newer way of doing things. They're embracing technology. It'll be easier for Gen Z to come in because they are always glued to their phones and other technologies. So it's easier for them to be more tech savvy than the other generations that are out there.
Yeah, to add to that, I would say start surveying younger, right? How many utilities have I heard that say, we're building a solution for the next 10 years? Well, how many 16-year-olds did you survey? Honestly, right? They're the next bill payer. I hate calling them that, but that's what we are, right? We're bill payers, right? So how many folks actually go to high schools and say, how do you think customer self-service should be? What does energy management mean to you? What does sustainability mean to you, right? Which is different than what your parents think, right? So I don't know how many folks are actually reaching out to the young folks that today aren't customers, but will be in the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Who some of these programs that we say we're building out are directly going to be impacting them, right? So if you start speaking to younger folks, you start enticing them, exciting them, and actually getting them really wanting to be part of this change, right? To say, well, wait a second, they just asked my opinion, so it must be important enough. Why did they do that? Okay, well, now I need to start researching and looking at my utility and paying attention to what's going on in that world, and because I was there for one session and they surveyed me. Right? So it's getting people excited about this, right? So to me, it's start young, partner with your local high schools, create different types of internship programs, even for high schools. Yes, high schoolers, right? We have probably around 7 high schoolers from inner cities that are working with us. They give us around 2 hours a day. Guess what? They're great at testing. They're super great at testing, right? Get them in there, get their hands dirty, get them involved. Talk to them like they're adults, treat them like they're serious, and they're going to go talk to their friends about it, and they're going to go talk to their families about it, and they're going to post it on social media, and they're going to put you on Facebook and Instagram and say, this is the coolest company in the world, we should all want to work for it. So that's how you get ready for Gen Z, that's how you get ready for the alpha generation that's coming in next, right? It's talk to them like they're serious.
The only thing I would add is, NYPA, being a state entity, also drives all these conversations within the schools, and we have, I think, around 14 high school students as part of our IT team being interns, some of them are interested in cybersecurity. I mean, they're so young. When I was in high school, I wasn't thinking about cybersecurity or anything else. But we see the change. We have around 14 interns for the whole year that shadow our employees, our subject matter experts, and trying to learn the industry. Then we have other programs where we actually go into high schools and have P-Tech programs where we educate them on STEM, what are the benefits, go into disadvantaged communities, educate them, and what does power mean to you. One example one of our senior leader gives is, he's in commercial operations, and he tries to connect the actual wrench that someone is turning in the plant to how does it benefit creating jobs in the in New York. For us, being a state entity is retaining jobs. So how does that wrench that someone turns is helping keeping the lights on and helping sustaining that job there. So I think that's very much I would say in line with what NYPA does, and that's the messaging that we actually give out.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, is Jason here? I'm about to give him a plug. Partner with a company like Frolic to come and create situations for you to go to high schools and actually have them go through augmented reality and virtual reality types of programs for people to see and understand a day in the life of a utility person based on different types of departments. What does it mean to be a call center agent today? What does it mean to be a back office billing person? What does it mean to be in the engineering department? What does it mean to be in the demand response team? Right? What does it mean to be in the innovation team, right? So create these types of situational awareness by utilizing technology, making it available to your community for them to download and experience things through augmented reality and virtual reality, right? Which again, makes you look cool, makes you look modern, makes you look like you're hip, makes you look like you're actually aware of where the industry is going, right? And then you'll realize it's going to change you all internally because you're gonna have to start thinking differently to maintain and sustain this, because it's not a one-time thing. Right? It's a continuous evolution internally you're starting from the top, right? Your CEO has to buy into this before your head of HR does, right? So, again, Jason, you should talk to a lot of these folks on how they can use AR and VR to support this next generation.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jason. So I know we've spent a lot of time talking about Gen Z and a little bit about, Generation Alpha, but it's true that millennials and Gen Xers are going to be in the workforce for a while now. So how do you balance the needs of these different generations? Because I feel like, Gen X and millennials feel more like bridge generations, right? And so how do you sort of serve everyone as you move forward?
We do have an employee resource group. It's called Generations. And we literally go through the aspect of how things were done in the past and now how things are evolving with digital transformation, more technology being used. There's a lot of content that we came up with, and I think one thing that is very constant for that we see is flexibility. With the pandemic, we have seen that we were able to work from home. It wasn't the case before. We were all asked to be in the office. But as soon as the pandemic hit, within 5 days, we had the systems up and running to accommodate, working from home. So if we can adapt at that change going forward and not go back to the ways we were doing things, and I think people, it's going to be a cultural change. It's going to be a shift that the Gen X's and the millennials will have to go through to be working with the Gen Z. But I think it will be a part of a bigger team and a bigger culture change.
Yeah, I would add to that. It starts with a few little words. Trust. I think that's really important, right? I think we all had to go through that working remote, right? You have to make sure you can't always. Is my team really working? What are they doing? No. So trust, I think, is a really important word. Giving space for people to make mistakes is another really important thing, I think, right? So that's across all generations. And then lastly, what I would say is, honestly, just show me you care. Right? I think that's a very important thing, because not a lot of people leave jobs because of money. Right? Money is a result. A lot of people leave jobs because they either don't feel loved, they don't feel heard, they don't feel welcome. Right? They don't feel they're adding value. They don't feel values being added to them based on where they want to go. So part of that is listening, right? Too. So to me, those would be the things that I'd say would be required to be consistently part of your leadership style, your HR environment, and having HR really have a much more proactive role than being just administrators. Right? Look at hiring behavior scientists in your companies. right? So they can talk to the people, right? Have a counselor inside of your company, because especially with working remote, some people get some, distress, and some mental health issues are real, right? So giving them someone to talk to, I think, is really great. And if you don't want to invest internally, then give some, incentives for your team, or pay for certain types of therapy sessions for your teams as well too, if necessary. And again, just showing people that you care.
I think we should start with recruiting Gen Zs in HR first, based on the discussion.
I'd add to it, we're also, I'm sure everybody here is finding it hard to hire people. Everybody, across industries, private sector, utilities, government, everybody, right? So one thing that we decided to do is we realized that you can teach anybody anything, but what you can't teach are certain characteristics and fundamentals that they come naturally within the person. So for each job, I think you all should work together as leaders to define what is it that I need out of this person to be able to be successful in this role. Do they really need to be a GIS expert? Or do they need to be very organized, detailed, understanding how to work with data, right? Knowing what numbers look like, right? And then having the ability to teach them to become a GIS expert, as an example, right? So that's another thing that most folks aren't comfortable with, because you always want to hire the expert. But the reality is those are very limited now. And if you find them, they're going to be really expensive. And it's a bidding war between you and 16 other companies trying to hire the same person today. So that's another thing I think people should really take into consideration.
Thank you so much. So with that, we have a few minutes. I'll open it up for questions. I think there's a lot of room for discussion here, because there's lots of different ways to approach this. So does anyone have a question? Oh, we've got someone down in the front over here. Do we have a mic? Just a second. I know, it's really bright.
Thank you. This is a fascinating conversation. Bashir, you just started touching on this, but I was going to ask, where do you hire? What schools would you look for people to be coming from, or experience for them to have, or you're just like looking for those qualities and we'll train you on whatever it is?
Honestly, at this stage, we decided to not overcomplicate things.
Right.
Look for the qualities, have proper assessments in place, for them to be able to be evaluated without wasting your hiring manager's precious time as well too, because a lot of our hiring managers have full-time jobs besides finding talent, right? So for us, it just became focus on the core characteristics we need, and then partner with universities and high schools, right? So depending on your geographic area, you might have a school that is stronger in finance and one that's stronger in tech. And to help your finance and HR background teams, back office, you partner with that university. So there wasn't really a one answer fits all for us when we decided to grow. And we had to hire, we're a small company, right? So we started last year with, I think, like 115 people. We closed the year with 250. Right, that's a huge, even for a company, or any company, to hire 100 people, right? It takes a lot of effort and time. And actually, a lot of that came through university programs, high school programs, internships that we've done, and kept those folks intrigued and enticed, and just watched them through their university progression, and then hire them as soon as they graduated.
I think it's a revolving door, right? So for us, internships. And the other thing that we are going through right now through HR is the whole job classifications. It's going to take some time. You're not there yet. We just did IT, and that's why I'm aware of it. The whole process that we went through is standardizing how people are actually posting positions. Utilities tend to overcomplicate things, especially when it comes to hiring someone, especially if it's subject matter experts. You see the list is so long, you cannot find the unicorns. So we are actually standardizing the way we're taking an approach to recruitment, is basically having job classifications that align with the rest of the industry, so it's easier to attract talent. So I think that's the process that we're going through right now. It's probably going to take another year or so to get to the end stage, but we're chugging along.
And part of that is we realized, if we're looking for the unicorn, instead of looking for one that's going to cost us X dollars, can we actually split it into two roles that are much less senior and maybe only pay 25% more than having to pay double, right? So we also had to look at that really strongly and say, well, what are the roles that we're willing to not have that expert, and then we as a leadership kind of supplement the experience and are able to help guide them through this journey until they become experts. Which means, yes, there's a lot more work on us, but the downstream value that we look at 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it's going to pay off.
So how much are you budgeting per person for their continual development, or somebody's learning cybersecurity, or they're like something that they weren't trained in? there's stuff to learn? Are you sending them to conferences? Like,
Yeah,
how
so,
much are
so
you
we're a small
investing?
company, so I don't know if people might think this is a lot or a little, but I mean, we budget per year around $7,500 per person in the company. That's
don't-
excluding our internal full-time trainers and academy folks that we hired.
And we don't have a budget per se. It all depends on the different job functions. So my team is definitely on the road a lot, and we have a very higher budget compared to someone in traditional IT back in offices. But they get access to all the trainings. There's a central department that focuses on just training, whether it's very high level managerial skills or even more deeper technical things. So we go through that department for budgeting. It's a pretty big budget for utility.
And focusing on soft skills was a key thing to us because, again, like we're finding a lot of folks who are very smart and can think and can analyze, but can't write a proper email to save their life. Right? Yeah. They go to ChatGPT, or they can't take feedback. They get just like really anxious about it, right? So, a big part of our learning and development program is focusing on soft skills, business skills, right? And what it means to actually work in an environment with people that have different opinions than you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a great session. I have a quick question. We've talked about this. Our customers, our workforce, the whole world is changing and very quickly, right? So, can you talk a little bit about the role of transparency, inclusion, and equity, specifically in helping to kind of accelerate our future workforce?
Anita, we've only got like 2 minutes.
I know. We need like a separate session for that. Yeah. You want to start?
Yeah. So I'll go really quick. So kind of tying to that whole performance management thing that I was talking about earlier. So for the sake of transparency, what we did is we enabled a product internally within our company to actually put our top-down corporate goals, department goals, and personal goals in actually one place. And what we decided to do, which might not be a popular thing, is we made it available for everybody. So now I can have my marketing team look at the goals of my finance team, because they all need to realize that we're all in this thing together. There isn't an us versus them, right? We have one mission, one vision, and we need to be moving together properly. And it was a very unpopular thing. My CFO was freaking out. The founder of the company was freaking out. And I said, listen, we really need to make people feel that they're part of this much bigger thing. Because you never know. Somebody might realize that there's a corporate goal out there that's behind that they can come and say, well, did you know I have this skill set to help you guys move forward? I'm like, so unless we put it out there, right, and make ourselves vulnerable, we're never going to know what other people around us can do to help us add value. So I know this is only one part of your question because it's a pretty deep one, but I just want, from a transparency perspective, as a leader, I feel it's really critical to have that with your teams.
Just to add on to that, and at NYPA we do the same thing too, but there's a distinction between how you do and how we do. There are goals that are public and there are goals that are private, especially when it comes to individual development. We have a distinction there, but yes, everybody has access to what the corporate goals are, and all of your individual goals are tied to those visions and the missions. And then the other thing I was going to mention was the whole recruitment process and everything. Equity is something that, the whole HR process that we go through is identifying what skill sets do we currently have in-house. I think that's a bigger effort that we took on a couple of years ago, is not just saying, oh, let's just go hire somebody, we have a position open, someone left. Is their talent internally, it might only be 20% of their time that they're helping on a project, but rather than going hiring someone for 100% of the time, you might find someone in a different business unit that's capable of doing things, so you're giving them an opportunity to grow outside of their box into a different department and helping the team out. It's like you said, it's one vision, one mission, and we're one big company, right? So it's finding the right talent in-house is very important.
Great. Thank you so much. Can we give him a round of applause, please?